We call these unique American artists traveloguers. They are independent filmmakers combining talent, imagination, and hard work to create travel adventure films. Traveloguers have researched the history of subjects, lived on location for months at a time, and photographed their journeys. After completing each film, traveloguers travel throughout North America with film to share their personal discoveries and insights with thousands of people. The film you are about to see was made by traveloguer Ed Lark. For more than 30 years, he has been known for his skill at capturing the spirit of a country through his beautiful photography. Ed Lark has won numerous awards for his filmmaking, including the Chris Award, the equivalent of the Oscar for educational films. His commitment to quality films has secured him more than 35 appearances before the National Geographic Society in Washington, D.C. Now travel with Ed Lark to the night sun in his film, The Wonders of Norway.
For thousands of years, a thick sheet of ice covered this land. As the glaciers receded, the wind, the rain, the rivers continued to shape this land into what it is today, a land of high mountains and deep fjords. Gradually, people from the south settled here. They built their villages in the fjords and along the coast because the interior was almost impassable during the winter. Yes, it was a harsh land. They were eventually called Norsemen, meaning people of the north. And that is what our story is about. Norway is a long country, about 1,000 miles in length. About a quarter of the length of this country lies north of the Arctic Circle. The capital and major city, Oslo. The symbol of this city has become the Holmenkollen ski jump. Every March, 100,000 spectators come here to see the World Championships. The summer months, with a pool at the base of the jump that is pumped out for the event. And in the background, the city of Oslo in the Oslo Fjord. On this site for the past 900 years. Today, the largest city with a population of 500,000, but Los Angeles in size. The City Hall, built in 1955, is surrounded by works of art by Norwegian artists. The statues along the front steps depict various occupations of construction workers. Unusual statues are everywhere. Norway's great novelist and poet Bjørnson, who was the winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1903, looks out from the National Theater, where he often directed plays. Oslo's ideal for shopping, since main stores are in the center part of the town, within easy walking distance. Modern malls are now a part of the Oslo shopping scene. And by the way, you'll have no difficulty getting around on your own, since most Norwegians speak English. You're not in Oslo very long before you realize that the Norwegians enjoy a high standard of living. Most families own automobiles, and two-car families are common. Stores are stocked with the luxuries of a modern society. Part of their prosperity is due to the oil discovered in the North Sea off the southern coast of Norway. In the month of July, the Norwegians generally go on vacation, leaving the city to the tourists. course, shops are still open, and we walk past many store windows and see beautiful items that we can purchase here in Norway, such as Norwegian sweaters. Before you do go shopping, I would suggest that you come here to the Design Center in Oslo, where they have a display of the finest products that this country manufactures. After you've looked around, then go out and make your purchases. I'm sure that you'll be much happier with what you get. The Norwegians have long been noted for their beautiful enamel work on silver, and they have won many world championships. Rhea rugs are always popular. Today, we find the modern as well as the traditional design. Flowers are seen everywhere from the first days of spring until October. They even have tulips, a special northern variety. Although Oslo is as far north as Anchorage, Alaska, the summer weather is comfortably warm with long days and short twilight nights. Consequently, delightful outdoor restaurants are everywhere. One popular outdoor restaurant is located in a small park between the Parliament Building and the National Theatre. Here, you may enjoy some of those delicious Norwegian strawberries. The park surrounding the outdoor restaurant is a popular place to spend a leisurely afternoon. In recent years, the city has permitted sidewalk stalls to be set up along one edge of the park. Here you can buy imported items, mostly jewelry, at some very good prices. In the evening, hundreds of young people crowd the downtown park or visit movie houses, theaters, or 22 of the city's nightclubs. You'll hear English, French, German, Italian, and Arabic. Many waiters even speak Norwegian with a foreign accent. Because of the immigrants and students from abroad, Oslo has acquired an international flavor. It also still features many typically Norwegian highlights. For example, Vigeland Sculpture Park. Back in the 1920s, Gustav Vigeland donated all of his works of art to the city. The city put his statues in this park where you may see them today. And right in the middle of the park is a 55-foot monolith with 121 figures piled on top of each other. Now, Gustav Vigeland said that that was the symbol of his religion, but he never told anyone what it meant. He said that as each person stands there, he must decide for himself its meaning. Surrounding the monolith are statue groupings depicting every facet of human life and emotion: love, hate, fear, happiness. Vigeland Sculpture Park contains one of the most impressive works of contemporary art, and all of it created by one man. When the sun shines, you'll find Norwegians coming to the park, for the Norwegians all worship the sun and will take every opportunity to get outdoors. You'll find that in Norway, virtually every family will have a summer cabin and boat, even if they can't afford an automobile. For a summer cabin and boat are considered necessities, not luxuries. On the weekends, the families will go to their summer cabins, or perhaps come out here to the archipelago and sail. Almost every weekend there'll be regattas for both children and adults. The young Norwegians take the water almost instinctively. But of course, the Norwegians have grown up along the water, and they feel comfortable along the water. The first settlers to this part of the world built their villages along the coast and in the fjords because the interior was almost impassable during the winter. But the warm Gulf Stream that flows along the Norwegian coast keeps the waterways open all winter long. So it was practical for Norwegians to travel from village to village by boat. They became seafarers and ventured down the coast of Europe, plundering cities, and became noted as those fierce Vikings. If we could turn back the hands of time about 1,000 years and look out into the archipelago, we would see an entirely different kind of boat. This was the kind of boat used by the Vikings to sail across the Atlantic to our North American continent. In some way, they were able to brave those Atlantic storms in those open boats to reach our shores. At the Viking Museum in Oslo, we may see a collection of the original Viking ships built 1,000 years ago. Although they had the most primitive of tools, they were still able to create those beautiful boats. Also at the Viking Museum, we see relics from that period, such as a beautiful hand-carved cart and the symbols of their pagan gods. These gods were found on the staved churches built in the 11th and 12th centuries because that was the period of transformation from paganism to Christianity. The people would not go in these churches unless they saw the symbols of their pagan gods on the outside together with a Christian cross. And by the way, it was the coming of Christianity that finally brought an end to the Viking era. Well, today, the young Norwegians march past the palace of the king. There on the balcony above stand the royal family waving at the citizens below. Of all the colorful celebrations that we find in Norway, the most important to the people would have to be their Constitution Day celebration. On this day, every Norwegian has the opportunity to express his love for his country and respect for his king. And thousands parade through the streets of Oslo, waving their flags high and proudly. Norway does have a king, but it's a democratic monarchy. The members of parliament elected by popular vote. They are the ones who plan the destiny of this country, with the king basically a figurehead. But I know of no other country in the world where the king is more loved than here in Norway. From Oslo, we're going out into the fjords, also to the west coast of the country, to the beautiful city of Bergen. After leaving the freeways surrounding Oslo, the roads begin to narrow. Most roads throughout the country are well-paved two-lane roads. We also find numerous switchback roads throughout the country because of the steep mountainous terrain. But believe it or not, they have bus service along this road. I went up to the bus driver and I said, "Is this trip really necessary?" The bus driver said, "Oh, don't worry if we don't make it, you'll get your money back." I also discovered that the Norwegian drivers are very careful because the careless ones don't live very long. However, Norway is not falls all summer long. This water provides Norway with an important and inexpensive source of hydroelectric power. In fact, Norway supplies electricity to her neighbors. Some of those power plants are carved right into the solid rock so as not to mar the natural beauty of this country. Those of you who are campers will find Norway a camper's paradise. Those of you who are traveling by automobile have the rare pleasure of sampling some of the delightful country inns such as Roisheim. 300 years ago, this was a working farm. But about 100 years ago, they turned it into a tourist hotel, and it has been that ever since. Here you have the opportunity to enjoy the flavor of old Norway. The bedding in Norway is a bit different from what we have. They use eiderdown quilts. You're supposed to wrap that quilt around you as a cocoon, hoping to stay in it all night. You know what this is? An iron. Nothing more than a wooden slat with a handle attached to it. You move it back and forth across the linen, the friction creates the necessary heat to iron the linen. That's the way they used to do it. You may wish to take a ride through the countryside by horse and carriage. You will pass buildings that have stood here for centuries. You truly feel as though you have stepped into the past. As we were going along this country road, we suddenly heard a distant dinner bell ring. That horse of ours galloped back to the farm. We couldn't even stop him. He knew what was waiting for him. After coming to one of these dinners, it doesn't take a great deal of encouragement to come the second time. Along the west coast is the city of Bergen, the second largest with a population of 220,000 in Greater Bergen. It's often called the most beautiful city in Norway, located at the gateway to the fjords and to northern Norway. The main shopping area extends all the way down to the wharf, where you find the outdoor market where one may buy everything from flowers to reindeer skins. The people of Bergen are very proud of their city, and rightly so. However, other Norwegians claim that those who live here brag excessively about their town, and there are many stories about the people of Bergen. There's one story about a youngster from Bergen who was attending school in a neighboring town. On the first day of school, the teacher asked the youngsters where they were from. All the students replied, except this one little boy from Bergen who refused to say. Well, at the end of the day, when the other students had left, the teacher approached this one youngster and asked him why. He stood up proudly and said, "Well, teacher, I'm from Bergen, and I just didn't want to brag on the first day." Also along the wharf are the old buildings from the Hanseatic League. 400 to 600 years ago, German merchants came here to establish commerce with the Norwegians. But they did not want to socialize with them, so they built their own apartment houses, warehouses, and stores. They stayed to themselves, except for business. Only German men were sent to Norway to be certain that they would return to the fatherland. Those old buildings are in striking contrast to the rest of Bergen, for this city is ultra-modern in every respect, enjoying the most modern amenities of any society. Steamships come and go every day, as well as hydrofoil boats that take us speedily to the various communities along the coast. Since there's so much water, there are boats everywhere. They're certainly well used on the weekends and during summer vacation. It's not surprising that an inspiring country such as Norway would father one of our great composers, Edvard Grieg. Grieg had his home here on the outskirts of Bergen. His home today looks exactly as it did when he lived here 90 years ago. It was here where he did much of his work, for he was inspired by the beautiful fjords, the mountains, and the forest. Grieg so loved his home that he asked to be buried here. Just below the house, near the water's edge, carved in the solid rock, is a crypt in which Edvard Grieg and his wife Nina are entombed. Although the Norwegians are very modern and progressive in their thinking, they do realize the value of their traditions because the traditions have made them what they are today. Many old world traditions prevail in the small communities, such as here in Voss, which is an hour-and-a-half's train ride from Bergen up in the mountains, where the youngsters are taking part in a mock wedding before their proud parents. The youngsters get their first costumes when they're about 3 or 4 years old, and they wear them proudly. The costumes generally represent the town or area where the people lived. But this is the way the parents are able to pass down the traditions to their children. Perhaps the little bride may wear the exact same style of wedding garment when she grows up and gets married. That is, the black jacket and the gold and silver ornamentation. Instead of wearing a veil, she will wear what is called the wedding crown. It's a special hat with a great deal of gold and silver on it. Each region has its own distinct style, and this comes from the area around Voss. It's obviously an expensive hat, so it's generally rented from one of the local stores. And once the bride has been prepared, she will then join the wedding party for the march to the church. I spoke to these young people before the wedding. They told me that it really didn't make any difference to them whether they were married this way or with the white wedding gown. They said that they were doing this more out of the wishes of their parents. I felt that it was significant that these young people were sensitive enough to their parents' wishes to do this. Most of the young people are married in the state Lutheran church, but there is complete religious freedom in Norway, and all religions are represented. The guests are served a traditional glass of cognac before entering the dining room for dinner. Yes, it's expensive to be married in the traditional manner because every guest must be served a meal. There are certain traditional dishes on the table, such as seafood. At the head table is the wedding cake that looks like a pile of donuts on top of each other, getting smaller at the top. And following dinner, the wedding party, together with all of the guests, will go to the reception hall and dance throughout the night. During the reception, the bride and her mother will slip away from the guests and go to a room by themselves. There, the mother will remove the wedding crown from her daughter's head and intricately braid her daughter's hair in a traditional manner. Then she will place on her daughter's head a hat that is a symbol of married woman. Here, too, each region has its own unique style. The bride and her mother will then return to the reception, with now the bride an accepted member of the married community. The young couple will try to find an apartment in town, but that's often difficult. They'll probably commute from one of the suburbs. However, they do enjoy a great deal of security, many social aid programs, including free hospitalization. When they decide to have children, they know that their youngsters will get a good education because schooling in Norway is free, from grammar school through the university. The children are also encouraged to participate in sports. Even before the children can walk, the parents will take them out into the woods so that they too will develop that deep love for nature that the parents enjoy. This love will last throughout their lives. You often find senior citizens walking through the wilderness areas. I know it's difficult to believe that this is a wilderness area, but it is. Well, in the winter, this is what you might expect to find. 10 to 20-foot snowdrifts along the roadways. In some parts of the country, there's eternal snow, and you can go skiing all summer long. Then there are other areas, especially in the south along the coast, where you have the warm Gulf Stream effect, where you find very little snow. Snowmobiles are used mostly for carrying freight. Snowmobiling as a sport has been slow to develop. Instead, Norwegians would rather go cross-country skiing, and when the sun is warm, you'll find them skiing in their bathing suits. Yes, the Norwegians take every opportunity to get out to their mountain cabins and to enjoy the magnificent scenery. It's not uncommon to see a couple stopping their car along the road, taking a card table from the trunk, climbing up on a snowbank, putting that card table on a pile of rocks, sitting there, eating lunch, surrounded by snow. Why does anyone in his right mind want to sit on a pile of cold rocks and eat lunch? But the Norwegians will tell you, every season has its own quality, and the Norwegians love every season. As the springtime approaches, the snow begins to melt. In the month of March, the Norwegians go on what they call a spring vacation. For 1 week, much of the country closes down, and everyone goes away. After experiencing a Norwegian winter, well, you may expect to find that people would like to go southward to the warmer climate. But you know what most of them do? They go right back up to the mountains for one last week of skiing before the snow disappears. The schools sponsor tours to ski resorts with the teachers as chaperones, and everyone will have a delightful time together. are abandoned today, but others are still very much in use. Because the farmer cannot take the land to himself, he must go to where the land is. If it happens to be on a steep mountainside, that is where his life is. Today they do have some modern equipment to help them, but it's still a difficult life. The entire family must work together on the farm. You may be interested to learn that there are very few farms in the country that are larger than 25 acres. Most under 10 acres in size. So it's quite common for a farmer to go into the neighboring town and get an extra job. At the end of the day, he returns to the farm to continue his work. A few years ago, the government introduced a program of animal husbandry. As a result, the income of the farmer has improved. Furthermore, because of that program, Norway today is self-sufficient in beef, milk, and butter. By the way, that is not one family. While the youngsters are playing in the hayloft, the women on the farm are making what they call flatbrød, or lefse. It's a special peasant bread that is made from ground-up potatoes, kneaded into a pizza shape, placed onto a hot griddle for a couple of minutes, and then turned over. It tastes similar to a thin, unsalted soda cracker. You can buy it commercially in the markets, but it's not nearly so good as the homemade kind. So about every 6 months, the women on the farms will get together and make lefse. Although it's difficult to earn a living as a farmer in any industrialized country, the Norwegian farmers have a good standard of living. However, the food is generally more expensive. There are some food items that are less expensive in Norway, such as milk and bread. Since Norway is so mountainous and the weather inclement, life among the farmers has always been uncertain. It's not surprising that they were superstitious. They believed in many things, including trolls, who were giants living in the mountains and in the fjords. They performed mischievous deeds. I would like to let a Norwegian tell you about their customs and superstitions.
Superstition is nothing unique for the people of Norway. Supernatural beings have lived and are still living all over the world. We have a man here whose name is Arne Taraldsen, and he has on many of his walks on the mountains and in the forests met them, and he will, with his drawings, show you what they look like. First, there are the trolls. Troll can be so old that trees grow on them. They've always got a very big nose, and this one is 2,000 years old. It grows Christmas trees, juniper bushes, carrots, and in the winter, ice. If the trolls are out in the sunshine, they will explode and they will turn into stones, and that is why we've got so many stones in Norway. He has a skiing stick and he just grabs a Christmas tree and he uses that. And he has always got a tail. His tail is very useful for steering when he's doing slalom. For every year there's a new fashion in skis, but he don't wear any boots. He likes to have fresh air on his toes. Oh yes, he's got 5 toes. And it's the next year fashion in skis, smiling skis. Generally, the troll lives inside a mountain and he is taller than church towers as well as being harried, stupid and slow to act. All mountains have their special troll. And his name is Troll of Voss.
We're going northward with the famous coastal steamer to see some of the beautiful offshore islands such as Værø and Lofoten. During the summer, on board ship, you may find yourself serenaded by a group of school children touring their own country under the sponsorship of the school system. Yes, it's a wonderful way for these young people to learn more about their own country. About halfway up the Norwegian coast is the ancient capital of the Viking kings, Trondheim, or as the local residents would call it, Trondheim. It was founded 1,000 years ago by the Viking king Olaf Tryggvason. It was here where the Vikings went out in their longboats across the Atlantic to the North American continent and down the coast of Europe, plundering cities. Today, Trondheim is located on the ice-free Trondheim Fjord. It is the country's third largest city with a population of about 130,000. The city still retains much of the flavor of the past in its centuries-old buildings that have been tenderly preserved. Some of the buildings have been turned into warehouses, rental stores, and attractive apartments that sell or rent at premium prices. Old bridges have been preserved as mementos of the past. The city of Trondheim has long been a shipbuilding and fishing center. Today, fishing is still an important part of Trondheim's industry. Walk along the wharf and watch fishing boats ply back and forth. Or you may wish to buy some shrimp directly from the fishermen. Most of the seafood will be found in the large indoor fish market. This is where the locals buy their food. Yes, seafood is a very important part of the Norwegian diet, and it's common that a Norwegian family will have seafood 3 or 4 times a week. Virtually every town in the country will have a place where the farmers may sell their produce directly to the housewives, and generally at prices a little less than in the neighboring stores. Norwegian strawberries are outstanding in flavor and size. Raspberries are also plentiful in Norway. Raspberries often grow wild along the country road. All you have to do is stop your car along the edge of the road, reach out the window, and gorge yourself on fresh raspberries. You often find signs in English throughout the city, since Norwegians realize that most foreign visitors can't speak Norwegian. Local residents want to make it convenient for travelers when they're visiting Trondheim. The most impressive cathedral in all Norway is here in Trondheim. It was here where most of Norway's kings were crowned. Its construction was started back in the 12th century. Today, it is still the official seat of the Archbishop of Norway. Adjacent to the cathedral, in a small park, is a long column upon which stands a statue of Olaf Tryggvason, that Viking king who founded the city 1,000 years ago. When the sun sets, you soon realize that the night sky doesn't get dark in the summer in Norway. In fact, you will not see the stars in Norway in the summer. This is quite a surprise to many visitors. Norwegians tend to be more conservative than their Scandinavian neighbors. Instead of going to nightclubs, the popular pastime is to go strolling or window shopping after dinner. As we continue farther northward with the coastal steamer, we come to the Arctic Circle in the island of Værø. About 1,000 people live on this island, most of whom are fishermen and a few farmers. Although they are a bit remote, they have all of the modern conveniences: indoor plumbing, electricity, telephones, television sets, and modern schools. So they have just about everything that they need. It's also in this area that they do a great deal of fishing for cod in the winter months. These pieces of cod are hung on high racks and dried until the summer, at which time they are cut down and used for a variety of commercial purposes, most of which to provide the Scandinavians with a Christmas delicacy called lutefisk or lutfisk. It is made by taking a dried piece of codfish, which incidentally is about as hard as a board at this time, and then soaking it in a solution of lye about 6 weeks before Christmas. It's kept in that lye solution about 3 weeks, during which time the fish becomes soft and pliable. It is then rinsed in water for another 3 weeks to get rid of the poisonous lye. It is then cooked on Christmas Eve and served as one of the traditional dishes. It might sound terrible, but it does taste pretty good. That is, if you don't have to eat it more than once a year. Here on Værø is a huge bird sanctuary where we find millions of seagulls, puffins, and other seabirds nesting in the rocks. Occasionally, you may find local residents coming here to gather seagull eggs. They told me that they prefer seagull eggs to chicken eggs. Some environmentalists would be critical of what you are seeing. But please keep in mind that they do this strictly for their own consumption. It is not done commercially. They take very few eggs compared to the millions that are found here. Anyway, who in his right mind would want to risk his life climbing among these rocks, gathering seagull eggs, unless he had a real craving for them? We were curious to know how they tasted. They were kind enough to give us a few. We discovered that the shell of the seagull egg is quite firm, and you really have to bang it on the side of the frying pan in order to crack it. It's also rich. Once in a while we did get an egg with a slightly fishy flavor, but most of the time it tasted very similar to a chicken egg. As we continue a little farther northward with the coastal steamer, we come to the Lofoten Islands, certainly among the most beautiful along the entire Norwegian coast. It's in this area where they're doing a great deal of oil exploration. Oil was discovered in the North Sea off the southern tip of Norway. We're now finding huge oil and gas deposits along the entire coast of Norway, even north of the Arctic Circle. So it looks as though Norway is fast becoming a major oil-producing country. People are a bit apprehensive about their new role in the world. Prior to this time, life was uncomplicated. They didn't have to worry about foreign intrigue and espionage because they didn't have anything that the major powers of the world wanted. Now with this oil, what will happen? What at first might appear to be a blessing could ultimately be a tragedy for these people. The Norwegians are well aware of the hazards and they're proceeding very cautiously. Today, petroleum engineers are coming into the Lofoten Islands and to the town of Svolvær, which is the provincial capital of Lofoten. Today, it's a picturesque fishing community, but because of the discovery of oil and gas, who knows how it will look 10 years from now. During the summer when tourists are here, we find very few fishing boats about. Some of the fishing villages are totally deserted. Occasionally you may find a fisherman going out into the bay, catching a few fish with line and hook. He does this strictly for the family's needs. If he catches more than what he can use, well, he'll give the extra fish to his friends, or perhaps leave the fish off at the local market. If you happen to be here in the months of January, February, and March, this is what you will see. Millions of fish along the Norwegian coast. The reason that there are so many fish during this time of the year is that the fish will leave the cool Arctic waters and come along the Norwegian coast into the warm Gulf Stream to do their spawning. Then the fishermen are out by the thousands. Yes, fishing is one of the major industries of Norway. They've developed many modern fishing techniques that are used around the world today. Norwegians have also been leaders in whaling and have developed many modern techniques there as well. In recent years, Norwegians have placed a partial moratorium on whaling because the whale population has declined to a dangerously low level. However, other international competitors have not seen fit to stop the whaling. Unless they do, these mammoths of the sea may become extinct because of man's greed. We're going to visit a small fishing village along the southern tip of the Lofoten Islands. Its name, Rene. Population, 650. It was certainly the most picturesque fishing village I have visited. It was surrounded by magnificent fjords and rugged mountain peaks. If you would like to visit Rene, and you happen to be in Oslo, for example, you would have to fly northward for about 2 hours to the town of Bodø on the Arctic Circle on the mainland. There you would board a coastal steamer and stay on that for several hours until you reach the town of Svolvær in the Lofoten. Then you would have to rent an automobile and drive for 2 days along narrow dirt roads, crossing fjords and sounds on those small ferry boats. Eventually, you would reach Rene. You might say to yourself, I must be at the most remote village in all Norway. But that just isn't true, for there are even more remote villages in the nearby fjords, and this shuttle boat will take you to them. Some of those remote villages may not have more than a couple of homes, others up to a dozen. Every morning, this boat will go out, gather the school children from the villages, bring them back here to Rene, and at the end of the day, return the children to their respective villages, which are an hour and a half's boat ride away. So some of the school children must spend 3 hours a day on this boat. If the sun does shine, well, you may find the youngsters on deck studying their lessons or perhaps reading a magazine. Those remote villages do have electricity and telephones, but those are about all of the modern conveniences. Occasionally, the weather can be so poor that the boat can't risk picking up the school children. Then, the children have to call in for their lessons. Once in a while, a storm will develop during the day, making it impossible to return the youngsters to their homes. Then they must spend the night at school. There are special facilities set up just for that purpose. You might ask the question, why does anyone want to live in such a remote area as this? And yet, if the government were to build roads to these villages, many of the people would pack up and move away because they would not want to live near those ugly bands of concrete, those symbols of civilization. Yes, you cannot begin to understand a Norwegian until you understand his instinctive love for nature. As we continue farther northward with the coastal steamer, we will visit the towns of Tromsø and Hammerfest. Many beautiful islands and fjords en route, one of which is called Trollfjord. The entrance is barely wide enough for our ship to pass. Once inside, we come into a small bay, just large enough for our ship to turn around and go right back out again. There are no docking facilities here. The ship comes in only during the summer when the weather permits and when tourists are on board. Believe it or not, we saw 2 small farmhouses at the end of that bay, totally isolated from all civilization. No roads, no telephones. They had to come and go by their own means, and that was by boat. The nearest store was a 2 hours boat ride away. You wonder why some Norwegians have chosen to live in such a remote area. The city of Tromsø, often called the capital of northern Norway, is a beautiful modern community of 40,000, a college town. The symbol of this city has become the modernistic church because of its unusual architecture. Here, too, the coastal steamer stops on its northward journey. These coastal steamers play an important role in the country's transportation system. There are 14 coastal steamers. It takes 12 days to go from Bergen to the northern tip of Norway and back to Bergen again. There's a coastal steamer that leaves Bergen every day of the year. These steamers are used mostly for carrying freight and mail. But in the summer, there are many tourists on board. Nearby, a memorial to that great Norwegian explorer, Amundsen, the first man to reach the South Pole. Although we are almost within sight of the North Pole, the summers here are very comfortable and warm. As we walked down the main street of Tromsø, we came upon a polar bear that was the most manhandled that I've seen north of the Arctic Circle. Hammerfest, the most northerly city in the world, on the 70th parallel, as far north as the northern tip of Alaska. The town was destroyed during World War II, but it has been rebuilt, and today it's a commercial fishing center. In the winter, north of the Arctic Circle, the sun doesn't rise above the horizon. Oh, there will be a slight amount of twilight for an hour or two, and then 22 hours of total darkness. The street lights are on 24 hours a day, but in the summer, the sun shines 24 hours a day. This is the land of the Lapps and the reindeer. In the early spring, before the snow leaves the ground, the Lapps will bring their reindeer to the coast, drive them across the sound to the offshore islands, where the reindeer will graze during the summer. Then the Lapps will pitch their tents along the coast on the nomadic life, a life that they have known since time immemorial. Yes, the Lapps are the true nomads of the north. They derive their main source of income from the reindeer, so when the reindeer migrate, the Lapps must follow. At the end of summer, the Lapps will bring the reindeer back to the mainland and to the interior, where the Lapps have their permanent winter homes that are just as comfortable as yours or mine. The Lapps are very proud of their heritage, and rightly so. You'll often find them wearing their costumes, except when they work, because the costumes are expensive. If you happen to be visiting among the Lapps, I would like to pass along a word of advice. So often, tourists look upon the Lapps as curiosities. They don't like that. Furthermore, their privacy is often invaded. Just because the flap of their tent happens to be open, it doesn't mean that you're welcome in, any more than if a door of your home happened to be open. Also, never ask a Lapp how many reindeer he has. This would be the same as asking you how much money you have in the bank. It just isn't polite. So if you are sensitive about their privacy, you'll get along very well with them. But life here in the north is so different. There are vast wilderness areas where no one lives except for the wandering. Day of the year, everyone from the largest city to the smallest village will gather along the river banks and fjords, build huge bonfires, and dance through the night to those old world melodies. happen to be in northern Norway in the middle of May, just before the arrival of the midnight sun, you may be standing here at the water's edge one night, look down at your watch, and see that it is midnight. And as you look up, you suddenly see that sun appear from behind the distant mountain peaks. For the next 2.5 months, that sun will not set.
We hope you thoroughly enjoyed this European travel experience. You can continue your exploration of Europe with other videos from the Traveloguer collection as your guide. Each Traveloguer video takes you to some of the most beautiful settings in the world. You'll visit many famous landmarks, as well as unique, out-of-the-way places that most tourists rarely encounter colorful pageantry and cultures that are vastly different from our own. You may even uncover your own heritage. One thing is certain, an excursion through the entire Traveloguer collection will greatly increase your understanding and appreciation of the world in which you live. To start or build your own Traveloguer library, call our toll-free number today.